The first rule of publishing is in academia is quality. Which are the good quality journals you should target. However, I would say equally important one is the audience. Citations generally comes through people who wants to read the article and people who wants to cite you to progress their research. So quality and audience are two biggest, I think, criteria to choose your journals. Apart from that, you also have to think about under the audience. You have to think about geographical distribution, equity of access. All sorts of things will come as sub-criteria, and then we go into journal databases and others to make sure that whether open access is available, whether we want an open access journal or not. So number of criteria, but I will go back to the first thing: quality, venue. Second is the audience.
As my work is multidisciplinary, I want it to be seen by researchers and clinicians and anyone who could use it. So I try and find journals that have that broad scope. I usually use a website like SciMago to look at the top ranked journals in my field and then see if my research aligns with the scope of that journal.
Kind of depends what the topic of your paper is, sometimes what the study design is and what field you're in. Obviously if you're doing a systematic review, there is specific journals out there that will publish systematic reviews and there's others that won't publish them, so that can sometimes narrow it down. You've got, population type participant group specific journals. So if you're publishing, if you've got a trial perhaps that's in schools, for example, you might target a journal that is about child development or something like that. But then you've also got specific journals for school health and that sort of thing. But then if you're looking at physical activity in schools, you may also be able to target that paper towards a physical activity journal. So I guess it's about looking at what the topic of your research is and always having a couple of options available to you, and then looking at the aim. Usually most of the journals have something on their website about their aims and scope, and so making sure you check that out before submitting to them, because that's something that will get your paper rejected really quickly, is if it doesn't fit in the aims and scope of the journal. So I'd suggest when you're writing your letter to the editor, making sure you're referring back to using those keywords in the aims and scope so that straight away they can see, yep, this is a good fit for our journal, and hopefully it will then at least go out for review.
Deciding which journal to publish your work in is a big decision. And of course the guiding principle has to be who is the most appropriate audience for that particular piece of research or that article. So aligning your work with the key population is always the biggest priority. It's important to make sure that the research aligns with the population. And so sometimes that means your audience is not necessarily going to be aligned with perhaps a Q1 journal or some of the highest impact journals. You might find that your target group, the audience for your work, needs to be a population that is smaller, more bespoke. And so, that is a real challenge to think about. But by and large, what I do want to achieve is all the work that we put into our research and articles, we do hope that they are going to make the biggest impact possible. We put sometimes years of work into these publications, and so we want them to actually mean something, to contribute, in my case, to the health and well-being of people. So that means targeting journals where they are most likely to be read and where they are most likely to be cited and where they're most likely to have influence and impact. So it's getting that balance right, getting the audience right, but also getting the impact right.
There are a few ways that I think about where I'm going to publish. First, I think about what journals I read, which journals I tend to like the work in, because that tends to be where my work finds its most natural conversation. And then when I sort of think about, a particular project, it's kind of about finding a match between a project and a journal. There are things that some journals are going to like that other journals are not necessarily going to go for. Do I want a specialist readership? My first article was about the publication of John Donne's poems. John Donne Journal was the perfect place to publish that work, because while it's not the most highly ranked journal, it was the fastest way to reach all of the Donne specialists and kind of, plant my flag in that field. But, then when I'm trying to make kind of a bigger, splashier, more methodological intervention, I might go for something more like Review of English Studies, which is going to reach a wider audience of literary scholars, but working across a range of national traditions and time periods. And then, of course, you go for the best journal you can publish in. The biggest, the one with the biggest readership, ideally one of the more selective journals. It just kind of is a way to make sure you're hitting the right readers, and also that people are going to be able to access your work.